As mentioned, the Premier of Saskatchewan is not happy about some of the conditions set out by Ontario and Quebec for approval of the Energy East pipeline.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Brad Wall is so determined, he moved a motion in the Saskatchewan legislature on Wednesday calling on those provinces to limit the regulatory process. And Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall joins me now from Regina. So, Premier, the motion in the legislature Wednesday, why?
Well, it was passed unanimously. I want to point that out, and I appreciate the NDP opposition in Saskatchewan helping us out with that. We wanted to pass it in light of the announcement or the pronouncement, perhaps, from Ontario and Quebec in terms of their view of the pipeline and the potential conditions or at least added processes that they seem to be advocating for approval beyond the National Energy Board process. You know, I would have thought that this particular pipeline would not come with the controversy that some of the others have, because this is about replacing foreign oil we currently import into the country from places like Algeria and Saudi Arabia, and it will take some oil off the rail, which is important, I think, in terms of safety. It adds value to Canadian oil here in Canada instead of just exporting the raw product. It provides lower price West Texas crude to parts of the country that are paying the Brent price, the international price, and obviously it has to meet environmental rigor in terms of the regulatory approval process that's in place. It has to be safe. The consultations have to happen. That's all prescribed in the NEB, and yet I think we've seen the potential, at least, of additional barriers from this intervention by Ontario and Quebec. And so I think it's important we be proactive on this, and that's what we're trying to do here in Saskatchewan.
Well, you seem to be exasperated by the governments of Ontario putting in these stipulations on this east-west pipeline. It's almost like it's almost impossible now to build a pipeline in this country.
I do not know how we are going to move our resource if this is a bit of a precedent. By the way, I have a concern with respect to the precedent possibility around the GHG request or requirement of Ontario and Quebec, where they want to know some sort of measure of GHGs of this oil, perhaps, or maybe it's the pipeline, or maybe it's the construction of the pipeline. By the way, that's part of the problem here, is that, you know, it's hard to quantify or to target, to focus really on what it is they want to analyze in terms of GHG. But what I find a bit frustrating, frankly, is that this measure, this test of GHG, has never been applied to the oil this pipeline will replace. And what's the upstream GHG of oil from Venezuela? It's a very heavy oil. What's the GHG footprint, or frankly the human rights footprint, of oil that we currently import into Atlantic Canada from Saudi Arabia or from Algeria? You know, and that's a bit frustrating, because it seems to me that Ontario and Quebec in this regard want to set a certain standard for our own oil that's higher than the standard we might apply to oil we're importing from foreign places.
But should the Prime Minister be more upfront in pushing this project? He seems to have gone to ground.
We want the federal government to lead on this. We think it's fundamentally important. This is a national process, a federal process that's prescribed. It's independent, it's rigorous. This is the NEB approval process. And at the end of the day, we think it's going to be important to see national leadership. It's a national issue. You know, there's
well, that's my
the
point, Premier. You and Premier Prentice in Alberta are speaking out, but not the Prime Minister.
Well, we're hoping that'll happen soon. You know, and I've had it put to me, is speaking out like this going to hurt or help the pipeline getting support in Ontario or Quebec? I think it can help. I think if more Canadians in those provinces and elsewhere know that right now Canada, counterintuitively, imports oil from Saudi Arabia and from Algeria and the countries I've mentioned, Venezuela, and we can replace that with Canadian oil, and we can add value to it, and we can get the oil in a pipeline instead of on rail cars, and we know the potential risks of that. I think if more Canadians know that story, they're going to support it, especially if they understand the rigor of the process that exists today. And so I think the risk of not saying anything, of complacency, we saw that in Keystone, where I think all of us in industry and government were a bit flat-footed and got behind in that particular debate and discussion. I just don't want to risk complacency or silence. I think we need to tell the story of what this pipeline is and how it's a good news story for the country and for Ontario and Quebec, who, by the way, Deloitte says, and I think the Conference Board says, are going to benefit significantly and disproportionately from an economic development standpoint, from a tax revenue standpoint. Let's get that story told, and I hope the federal government joins in that effort.
What isn't a good story are these oil prices that fell below $70 on Thursday. What's the impact going to be on Saskatchewan and Alberta economy?
Well, there will be an impact fiscally, certainly, and we watched that last week as well. This slide continue. I mean, the midterm range is still, relatively strong, but they haven't got it right this year. We were at mid-90s. So there's an impact on the budget. However, when the dollar comes down, all our exports are sold in U.S. dollars, and so as the dollar comes down with oil, there's a bit of an offset for our budgets. Economically in Saskatchewan, we're fortunate to have conventional development. The U.S. Geological Survey says that the Bakken Formation, which we grudgingly share with North Dakota, is the largest conventional play in North America. It's a lighter, sweeter crude, and so it can sustain, I think, lower prices and still produce. But still, lower prices might mean less production, fewer related jobs, and we're going to make adjustments for that. Certainly in our budget, which is balanced. We want it to stay that way. And we're watching carefully as to its effect on the economy. I think it'd be naive to say there won't be one, but we also need to be a bit measured in the assessment. In our province, we also have potash and uranium and a strong agriculture sector and a growing manufacturing sector, and we'll rely on that diversification, hopefully, to help us through some potential short-term issues in oil.
Premier, thanks for coming on to the show. It's always a pleasure to have you and speak to you.
Thanks, Robert.